Hi, everybody. Welcome. And thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jen Turchnow. I'm CEO of ARINGO MBA Admissions Committee, or MBA Admissions Consulting. And so today we're going to be talking about 5 things admissions committees are looking for. But while we wait for everybody to join us, we'll start with a bit of a icebreaker. So while you guys are joining us live, please share where you're from, where you're applying to, and what schools are on your list. That'll help us with getting to know each other. And then also, if I find anything relevant to mention as we go along in the presentation, I'd love to share it. So excited to chat with you. And then I think it's Ludi. Yep. And so I know that GMAT Club was able to post a link about getting a free consultation, and we have another link that I'll share in the chat box that will allow you to actually be able to meet with me and schedule an email to schedule a consultation directly. So I'll put that in the chat box when I have time. Okay, perfect. Actually, GMAT Club has already posted it, so that's fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. So looking forward to find out where everybody's from, so don't be shy. Please do share. So as again, we're waiting, I will be here broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia, where it's a beautiful sunny but cold day. So exciting. I see that we have Carolina from Chile joining. Oh, but now she lives in Miami. Awesome. Well, nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us. Anybody else want to share? Anybody looking at MBA programs, looking at what we call like T10, M7, top 15, top 25. We'll talk about all those schools in a little bit. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. If you have questions along the way, obviously, please do use the chat box. I'm here to answer your questions along the way. Once I cover a subject, I'll stop and pause and see if there's any relevant questions. If by chance your question isn't answered or gets skipped over, please feel free to add it again at the end, and I'll be excited to answer that question later. Okay, Ganesh, thank you so much for joining us from India. And I see that some questions about finalizing your school list. And then, Wendy from Tanzania. Perfect. And you're applying to INSEAD. Perfect. All right. Okay, so we'll get started. So again, my name is Jen Turchnow, and today we're going to be talking about the 5 things that admissions committees are looking for in your application. We'll be going through that. But before we get started, I'll share a little bit more about me and ARINGO. So I've been in admissions for almost 10 years. Helping people with reaching the next step in their career is something that's really important to me. And I'm really passionate about helping people and crafting their story. And that's how I ended up in admissions. And I love working with MBA and B school candidates. So ARINGO has been around for about 20 years, and we've been helping candidates get into top MBA programs and B schools ever since then. And ARINGO was actually founded by our founder, Gil, and he started ARINGO after getting into Wharton with a 650 and, really understood that there's something more to your application than just a GMAT score. And by talking about these 5 things that admissions committees are looking for, we're going to help you with tailoring your application to make sure that the committees really get to know you. So we'll get started with a little bit about how we can help you. So ARINGO, we are a full service admissions consulting firm. So we can help with everything from strategy, school selection, to deciding how to prepare your CV or your resume or convert your CV to a resume. We work on essay writing, and we help applicants really shine throughout the entire process to help you get that interview. Once you get the interview, we'll also help you with your interview preparation, and then if needed, waitlist support as well as strategy negotiation. So that's a little bit about ARINGO. We've helped about 4,000 people over the past 20 years in getting accepted to top 10 MBA programs globally. So that's not just in the US, that's also in Europe and UK as well, and then as well as Singapore. So all the global MBA programs. All right, so as we get started today, I think it's relevant for us to talk about MBA programs, why people are doing an MBA, who should be doing an MBA, how do you choose where you're going to apply to, and then we'll talk about the application process. Then we'll jump into those 5 things that admissions committees are looking for. So stay tuned for that. So, briefly, we're going to be looking at your academic readiness, how we're going to illustrate how you're qualified for an MBA program, how we're going to illustrate your teamwork and your leadership, your employability, and then also how you're a good fit for that school and how that school is a good fit for you. All right. And Johnny, you have a question about profiles are evaluated different for 1-year and 2-year programs. So we'll talk a little bit about that later as well, but there is a difference. And so the biggest thing is going to be work experience, and if you need an internship or not to make that transition to the next step. So we'll talk about that as we kind of dive in. All right, so obviously, if you're here, you know a little bit about B schools or MBA programs. And so if we look at it, there's several different varieties of MBA programs. So one is the traditional full-time 2-year MBA program. That's what's most common in the US. And so those are 2 years. You can see here the years of work experience they're looking for. 3 years is really the minimum at time of application. There are a few that are maybe pivoting into a little bit less work experience as things kind of start to change in the MBA landscape. But for the most part, they want you to have about 3 years of experience as you come in and start the MBA program. And then you start to top out around 7 to 10 years of work experience. And then most of them do require for you to do a standard exam, whether that's the GMAT, GRE, or the executive assessment. And then there's also the 1-year MBA programs that are still considered a full-time MBA program. That's a little bit more common in Europe, UK, and Singapore. And so we're talking about LBS, INSEAD, HEC Paris. Those programs all offer 1-year programs. Some of them offer a couple of different varieties as to how you complete the degree, but those are the typical full-time MBA programs that most people are applying to, and that's often referenced in GMAT Club. So when we start talking about the other options that you have, sometimes when people talk about how competitive the programs are, it's not as relevant for maybe an executive MBA or even a senior MBA program or even part-time or online. So an executive MBA is part-time. It's definitely for seasoned candidates. While it says here the minimum is 5 years of work experience, it's really 8. So they're looking for 8 years of work experience, and they want a lot of leadership when they're looking at your application. And then the senior programs, those are sometimes referred to as the Sloan Fellows programs. And so they're really looking for 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 years of work experience. And that's the Stanford MSX program, the LBS Sloan Fellows program, MIT Sloan Fellows, USC IBEAR, or the Foster Global EMBA program. Awesome. So now, why would somebody want an MBA? And again, for any of the varieties that we've already discussed, It could be because you want to switch your career. So let's say that you want to pivot from being a software engineer to being a product manager. And so an MBA is one of those ways to be able to make that move and do it much faster than you could traditionally trying to move up through a company. Or even moving to a different company, it might not be as easy. So then there's also career accelerators. So those are folks who are looking to move up the ladder much more quickly and want to skip kind of that middle management time, and they want to be able to start in more of a senior role. And then there's folks that are looking to start their own business and be an entrepreneur. And so the MBA program is going to fill in the gaps for them as to all the different foundational parts of business, but also starting to form relationships and learn a bit more about different career fields. And then there are some people who what we're referring to here as me time, and that's some people who just want to take a break. And oftentimes those are people who have been in consulting or investment banking, something that's a grueling career, and they're just like, whew, I need to slow down for a minute, decide what I want to do with my future, because I don't have time to do it when I'm on my own, working 80, 90 hours a week and traveling internationally. I just don't have time to kind of really look out for what's ahead for me. Or maybe it's a time of confusion, right? Like, so you could be sitting in the same job for years and decide, I don't know if this is right for me. I'm not super happy. We saw a lot of that happen during the pandemic. And so that's another reason that people choose to go into an MBA program to help do some self-exploration. All right, Erin, you have a question about a break from work. You took a break from work already. And you're wondering, how would adcoms look at that? So I think it's all in how you phrase the time that you took off and what you did during that time. Obviously, if there's medical issues, that's something, but they're going to be looking at, did you maybe potentially do some consulting? Did you help with a startup? Did you do some volunteer time? That's what they're kind of looking for, because ultimately, anytime an admissions committee sees, and it's not really the admissions folks, it's more of the people at the round table that are like professors and maybe some of the higher ups that are looking at a gap in employment, and they're like, he was probably just sitting around playing video games the whole time. You're like, well, that's probably not what was going on. But they want to know about how you've progressed, whether that's personally or professionally. All right. So why an MBA? Obviously, there's the career transition that you can make, but then also the return on investment. You're going to make tangible money in the next 3 to 5 years to help pay off your MBA loans, but you're also going to help you with finding the purpose in life, being able to make any career switches, build this network, experience cultures around the globe if you aren't able to travel during that time. But if you are, then you get to have this international experience that you might not have gotten already. And then, I think, again, it's a really great time of self-exploration. You have a lot of doors that are going to be open to you to say, like, okay, maybe I'll try this for the first time and see how it goes. Especially maybe you're somebody who's a bit more of a head down worker, a little bit more shy. This is a great time to kind of open up your shell and say, like, okay, these are my people. This is what I should be doing. This is where I really blossom and grow. All right. So no more questions right now. So who are the top MBA programs? Obviously, you can look at several different ranking systems. It feels like there's so many places to look. But honestly, a lot of people are going to either refer to U.S. News and World Report. They're going to have the top MBA programs for the U.S. And then there's also the Financial Times. Financial Times is going to give you the global rankings for MBA programs. Both ranking systems also give you a bit more of the eMBA, online MBA, part-time MBA, and then specialized master's rankings as well. So you can kind of look to them to start deciding, what school is going to be best for me, where's the return on investment, who carries the most clout in this area that's really going to help me with moving forward in my career. And then here we go with the top programs in the US. Many of them probably look very familiar. These are kind of, in the US, we call them kind of like household names because they're well known for everything. So when somebody references Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, or MIT, they're often well known, not just for their MBA program, but also any other program you can think of. Like many of them are offered or referenced in different studies, or I know that's actually probably the biggest place, right? Like every time they're like, a study released by Harvard shows that XYZ happened. And so these are your household names that pretty much your mom, your friend, somebody outside of the business world is probably going to understand at least the college name, if not the MBA program name. And then here are the top programs in Europe. These, I would say, are a little less known. My mom would never know who LBS is, or INSEAD, and that's just because, you know, she's not in this world. But these are the top ranked programs from across the globe that are really prominent within the business world. These are the places that people are recruiting for top career seekers. All right. So I kind of mentioned this before, but US schools are a little bit more of that famous, everybody knows them, traditionally going to be in that 2-year MBA phase. The schools that are not or offer a 1-year option for typical full-time MBA candidates are going to be Emory, Kellogg, and then there's some tech MBA programs from NYU and Cornell that are also 1 year, that are still in the same zone of years of work experience, but give you an accelerated version. There's some other schools that do offer 1-year programs in the US, but they typically require either more work experience or a master's degree. So if you're looking into those, just be cautious of what's really required before you start the application process. European schools, they're going to tend to be a bit smaller and only teach business programs. So MBA and specialized masters, for the most part, they'll have some sort of master's in management and a master's in finance. And then the MBA program, some of them have a couple other spinoffs beyond that, but for the most part, that's what they're looking at. They also have high international enrollment. So these programs are really looking to help blend cultures, especially from where they're from. It really makes sense that they're going to be primarily international cohorts. And so any international experience you have is going to be really great to show them going into the MBA program, because it makes you a great fit for working across cultures if you've already done it. And then, you know, the biggest thing is determining where you want to work. This is how you start deciding on your MBA location. Do I want to work in the US or do I want to work abroad? Some people will do a mix of both. And so they might say like, oh, I want to apply to T10 schools in the US, but then I want to add in LBS and INSEAD just to see if it's a possibility. And then I could really, you know, take that risk if I get admitted. So I'll pause right here. Has anybody seen any schools on these lists that they're excited about? Anybody planning to apply to schools in the US or in Europe? All right. So if you decide to share, we can talk about it on the next in the next couple of slides as well. All right, Jason, tell me, what schools have you been considering that you've seen on this list? All right, INSEAD and LBS for Naji. Yep. And then UK programs. Perfect. MIT. I love it. Is anybody interested in a school that they haven't seen on the list that you're like, oh, I'm particularly interested in this program because of X, Y, and Z? UK. Excellent. So I'll just make sure to mention those as we go along. As more schools pop up, I'll try to make sure that I'm crafting them, our conversation, to match those as well. So choosing the MBA, we've kind of gone through this a little bit more, but each school kind of has their own specialties. So some schools are known for marketing, supply chain, consulting, product management. So you want to go to a school that makes sense, because these are the employers that are going to be there. So you want to look at the location, look at the ranking and the cost of the program, make sure that's feasible for you. And then we'll also want to look at, the specializations, who's going to be recruiting there, the teaching method. So I think you probably heard of the case method, and different types and styles of learning. A lot of schools at this point in time are doing hands-on learning, whether it's a case or if it's actually helping a business. So they call that like an action lab or live action learning. Carolina, you asked to go back to the European schools. So here's that slide. And so we'll see OBS, INSEAD, IESE, HEC Paris, or HEC Paris, Cambridge, Oxford, Bocconi, ESADE, IMD, IE, and then there's obviously still plenty more schools that aren't listed on our slides, but these are the main ones that you might see. All right, so we talked about how to choose them. We don't want to wait for the last minute to submit your application. You can't just do this overnight, right? So it takes some planning. You want to make sure you have everything that's needed for those schools as far as prerequisites. You make sure you have a 3-year or 4-year MBA equivalent, depending on what the school requires. And then they also want to see your transcripts. Some of them will require for you to do an English proficiency test, such as the TOEFL or IELTS. And then some of them are most of them are going to require the GMAT GRE or the executive assessment. There are a few schools that will allow you to do an internal test. I would say that those are mostly going to be focused on the specialized MBA programs for senior candidates. So the application, it's a bit grueling, but it's a really important part because this is where the committee gets to know you. So they'll have an online application with lots of short answers. And obviously you have to put in your transcripts and the classes that you took and the grades that you made. That part is kind of bleh. But it's needed because they're going to do their own calculations as far as what your GPAs look like and how they represent them to their admissions committee. They'll want to see a resume that's more of like a MBA formatted. And again, we'll get back into that later. They're going to want to have you answer some essay questions. Some of them can have one essay question like Harvard, or they could have 7 like INSEAD. They're usually going to want 2 letters of recommendation, both professional. And then once we get to this part, they're going to want to interview you and get to know you more personally. Then we're going to talk about the obvious criteria that they're going to be doing and what they're going to be looking at. So this is kind of a general outlook of, they're going to be looking at your entire application. And I think like when you hear that like, an admissions committee only spends 60 seconds on your application, that's really not true. So admissions committees are really invested in getting to know you, and it's all about finding the right fit for them. That's really where MBA programs are at this point. They're crafting or curating a class. So every point that's on your application is something that they want to know. And I think you should definitely invest the time to get to share that with them. So here we go. So what is an MBA admissions committee looking for? They're looking for academic readiness. So the GMAT or GRE is going to give them a good understanding of your analytical and quantitative skills, also the verbal skills. And so this helps them have an even platform for everybody to be judged on as far as where you stand as far as readiness for the program. Now, a lot of people have questions about, should I do the GMAT or the GRE, or should I take the chance on the executive assessment? So honestly, admissions committees, They do not have a preference on one or the other as far as US schools go. And I would say that European schools don't have a preference either, but they tend to know the GMAT a lot better. So a little secret is that right now, when we look at those MBA admissions rankings or admissions program, I'm sorry, when we look at MBA program rankings, right now, those are based off GMAT scores. So that's how they're all kind of based, is like, what's your average GMAT score, the range, the median. So they're going to be judging the school on that, but they're not doing that for GRE scores right now or executive assessment. And so sometimes while you can't find that, it's because it's not part of the rankings. And that gives you a little bit more leeway. Admissions committees are going to be a little bit more lenient with GRE because they can accept a wider range, although they still want to stay in a safer area where they've seen candidates with that average GRE score, quant, verbal, have success in the program. They do have a little bit more wiggle room than normal. The next thing that they're going to be looking for is your education and your GPA. So there's no way that an admissions committee can know every single school and know the rigor of the program, but they do want to see this to be able to understand a bit more about you, the type of program that you were part of. And then from there, they want to also know, where did you stand in your class? So a lot of the times when we're working with our candidate, with our clients, we'll ask them, like, even though they give us their CGPA, like, where did you stand in the class? Like, because one thing, for instance, in India, we know that a class topper is not going to have a 10 out of 10 CGPA. Usually it's going to be closer to a 9. So admissions committees do know that. And so one way that you can make sure that their mind is really certain that you did well in your program is by putting your class rank in there. If it's good, if it's a positive, or top percentage, those types of things, so that they can kind of see this picture in full scale. So like if you have a 7.5 out of 10 CGPA, it's still a strong GPA. Even though, like, when we start to look at the US scale, it's a little bit more on the other side. Hold on one second. Excuse me. So we want to make sure that the school sees your academic readiness, that you're going to be doing very well in their program. So one other way, so somebody was talking about, is GPA evaluated and standalone, basic, college attended, like X GPA from college A and the same from college B? So I think I answered that. Thank you. That, there's no way. So what happens when an admissions committee gets your scores or your GPA is they're going to start their own matrix. So no matter what, the application typically goes into a central system for the entire university. They process it, and then they send the application over to the business school. The business school, despite anything that you might see like on the surface level, is going to start making a matrix of your profile. So they're going to have your work experience. They're also going to have your standardized test scores, your GPA, how many credits you had, your major GPA. So it is really important that you put all those classes in there and put in your grades. I know that it's, again, not a very fun experience, but it is something that really does get used during the review process. When they go to the table and the admissions committee is making decisions, that's one of the core things they're going to be looking at. So you'll want to make sure you put that in there, put the percentile, and then any sort of academic achievements or things that you want to list. Now, honestly, in most applications, there's a lot of room for you to add some of this stuff into the actual form itself. So you don't have to use all of the room on the education part of your resume to be able to share that. So if you have those awards and there's a section on that application, you can use that section of the application to put in those details and not have to worry about using up room on your resume. So any questions about the academic readiness? I'm going to take a sip of water while we wait for some questions. All right. So if more questions come in, I'll definitely answer them along the way. So the next thing that they want to do is they want to hear about your qualified experience. They want to know about your work experience. That's going to be the most important part for them, right? Like, so over the last 2 to 3 to 5 years, what have you been doing? What is your career trajectory? What have you been exposed to as far as the business goes? So there's a big difference between somebody who has 3 or 4 years of experience where they've been sitting in a cubicle, head down, working very siloed, maybe as an engineer, versus somebody who's maybe has like 2 or 3 years of work experience, but yet has been working with several different departments, right? So this is what they're looking for. They want to know that you understand the foundations of business in general, right? Like you've understood, you know that there's an accounting department, how it works. You've maybe worked across departments with marketing, with product, or supply chain. It doesn't have to be every department, and it doesn't have to be super substantial, but they want to know that you understand how businesses function from your years of work experience. You can show this in your resume through your bullet points for your accomplishments for each one of them. But then they also want to see, you could maybe illustrate some other points in an internship. And then they also want to see about your management style or leadership that you've taken, and then also what kind of cultures you've been exposed to. So that work experience that you have, how are you going to be able to use that during the classroom time and being able to bring to the table and help enhance the conversation? Because MBA courses are not straight on lecture where somebody's talking to you and just delivering a message. They're asking you, oh, as a teacher, how have you used supply chain? Or as somebody who's worked in, like, how is that different from somebody who's maybe worked for UPS? And then being able to kind of bring in those different factors to talk about maybe different obstacles that you have to overcome. And then also being able to show different case scenarios for maybe different financial models, or thinking about different theories. It's how you apply the information that the professor is talking about in your groups, in your projects. That's what they're looking for. Okay, so, somebody is kind of spamming our group. I wouldn't click on that one. So how to describe your professional achievements for an entrepreneur. Okay, so this is fantastic. So if you're building a business from scratch, you have a lot of work ahead of you. So you want to be able to talk about what you've accomplished, how big the business has grown, whether that's people, money, time. And then they also want to know about what you've accomplished, or what you've, the problems that you've solved, and how you've been able to leverage the experience to help find those solutions. That could be, working with 10 different clients across the globe, or you could say like pan India, or different, like across the US, whatever it might be, to accomplish X, Y, and Z, deliver whatever the deliverable might be, increase things by X%, whatever it might be. They're really looking for you to paint that picture for them, especially since they won't know your business, because you're not a Google, an Amazon, a GE, or Procter and Gamble. Like, you're not a common household name. So you need to really help them see what you've done, what you've accomplished in your own business. And so that descriptor line on your resume is really going to be helpful with that as well. So you just have to have a short line about what your business is. And it could be, describing the amount of business that you have, what you deliver, and then also the impact that you have in a very short sentence that's condensed. That's what we have consultants for, to help you with how do you put all this on a resume. Okay, so next, are mature aspirants out of flavor for M7 B schools? So KP, I'm not exactly sure How many years of work experience? I don't know what mature exactly means. I'll say that typically M7 is not going to admit somebody over 10 years of work experience. Their sweet spot is about 5 to 7 years, maybe a little bit lower, maybe a little bit higher, but 10 is about out. If you have more than that, there are some alternatives that we can always talk about. Specifically with the M7, we'll talk about Kellogg having a 1-year program, the MMM, they have an MBA. Then when we move over to Stanford, they have an MSX program that's geared for 8 years of experience or more. And then there is MIT, who has the MIT Sloan Fellows program, which is geared towards people with 12 years of experience or more. Or we could also talk about EMBA or part-time for some of them. Awesome. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. The admissions committee wants to see what kind of leader and team player you're going to be while you're at the MBA program. So anything that you can put into your resume or your essays about your managerial skills, how you're a team player, are going to be really important. So I saw somebody's Instagram the other day, and they were talking about I versus me statements, or I versus team statements. And so, you want to have a good blend, right? So you want to be able to share a bit about what you've done as a leader, and then also how your team has accomplished something. And so being able to bring that in really helps the committee see how you're going to interact with your peers, how you're going to contribute, especially when you get in the classroom and they throw you into a group. Nobody is assigned a leadership role, and everybody is at a top MBA program. So they're obviously very well qualified, every different type of personality. How do you jump in and how do you help move towards the goal? Whether that is taking the leadership role, the organizational role, or the includer, somebody who helps with making sure everybody's ideas are heard. You don't always have to be the person that is the leader. And so if you can show that on your resume and say, like, I was part of a team that delivered X, Y, and Z. My main role was making sure that we were following the timeline, whatever it might be, the project management side of things. That could be a great point to share with them. And it would be important to them versus like maybe what a traditional like job interview would be like. So leadership skills, again, you want to be able to lead teams on the professional side, but then also in the social side. So let's say that on your day-to-day basis at work, you're not really leading teams, but in your personal side, you're on an executive board, and maybe you're managing all of your international partners. And those are great leadership qualities that not only show organization across cultures and obviously across timelines, but then also, this international interaction is really fantastic and a great way to talk about overcoming cultural differences, communication, what you've learned, and how you're able to collaborate across those different cultural differences, especially if there was any sort of conflict. Again, this might be a little bit different from a job interview where you don't necessarily want to talk about conflict, but in the MBA application, it's great to talk about conflict because it's going to happen while you're in your MBA program over the next 2 years. They are going to see how you resolve that, how you work beyond it. So they want to see your leadership inside at work, as well as any sort of social, personal. It could even be hobbies. It doesn't necessarily have to be volunteer work, but you could have leadership as far as like being the team captain of your rugby team or your football, soccer team, or maybe you organized a small group of people to sell items at a fair or in the community. Anything like that can be used as part of your extracurriculars and add to your profile. All right, so let's see what kind of questions we have. Any specifics for LBS, Oxford, and Cambridge? So I will say that LBS, Oxford, and Cambridge are definitely going to be looking at your extracurriculars. LBS specifically is looking for that international and cultural piece because 90% of their class is international. And so when you have that melting pot, they want people to be able to navigate those differences and be able to overcome any differences and be able to work together. So it doesn't mean that you have to have international travel experience or you don't have to be located in a different country to be able to have that. You can be working remotely with them or virtually on a day-to-day basis as well, and that could also count. The only place that usually counts is INSEAD. INSEAD typically likes you to have international experiences in person. Most other schools will be excited about international interactions or cultural interactions that are virtual or in person. Then beyond that, as far as KP, so 15 years of work experience. Yeah, so 15 years is a bit high. And so when you're looking for those MBA programs that are going to be full-time, like I said, that I think that you should be looking at the senior programs. So those again would be MSX, MIT Sloan Fellows. You can also look at USC IBEAR, Foster Global EMBA program. Those are all schools that you should be looking at as far as the US goes. I would say that you could also look at UK and European schools, but they tend to also start maxing out closer to 10 to 11 years. Some schools do offer a profile evaluation like HEC as well as INSEAD. So you can always reach out to them and see if there's anything that they would, if they're open to your profile. They'll be pretty honest if they feel like you meet or don't meet. Okay. So Biswa Deep, you have 1.5 years of volunteer experience post-graduation in the Rotary Club, joining the paper. Oh, before joining a proper job, sorry. Well, I think it's just depending on whether this experience will help or hinder your application. Just depends on how you're putting it together. So if you volunteered for a year plus after you graduated and did not work, I think that they want to know why. And so if there's a strong reason, compelling reason why, then they want to hear about it. They don't want you to jump over it. They don't want you to make excuses. Tell them why you decided that you needed to take that year and a half to work with the Rotary Club before starting your professional job. If it had to do with the pandemic, obviously there's a lot of exceptions that have been going on over the past couple of years because of the pandemic. So you can always talk about that, like that the job market wasn't as strong, or you have compromised health and working remote wasn't an option, or working in person wasn't an option. So you decided to do the best that you possibly could with your time and joined a nonprofit organization to contribute to the business community around you. I don't know. That's my thought. Okay. So why would INSEAD admit full-time MBA when U.S. business schools won't? I'm not sure what that question means, KP. I think maybe we're talking about the years of work experience. I think that it really just depends on if they feel like you're hireable after the MBA, because it's 1 year without an internship. So they want to know that you can make it to the next step in your career without having that internship, and that it's suitable for them. INSEAD is like its own little caveat as far as what they're looking for. And we can dig into that in just a few minutes. Best place for an applicant to talk about strengths, international experience, essays. Okay, so where should you talk about these experiences and your strengths? So there's your resume and your essay. If it's international experience that you've had in your professional job, then you want to put it in your resume, kind of within that bullet, managed 3 accounts across Europe, or managed XYZ in London, France, and US, or whatever that kind of look like, so that you can list out the countries if it's not too many. If it's like more than 3, then maybe you want to say, across the globe in 5 countries or something like that. Again, something will perfect as time goes. And then if it's something about your cultural experience that you've had, you could also talk about it in your extracurriculars. If it's something like you've traveled to 72 different countries, then you could put like that your hobby is traveling, and then you'd put a parentheses, been to 15 plus countries. Or I prefer to see if you can blend it together. So like we had this amazing candidate a couple of years ago, and he liked to travel and he liked photography, and specifically underwater photography. And so for his hobby, we listed like underwater photography, and then in parentheses, and he's like, taken photos in over 15 countries. So we were able to kind of blend those 2 qualities together to make it a really interesting fact, and really entice them to talk more, to want to know more about him. Okay. Where's the list, please? Okay, we've already talked about that. Round 1 versus other rounds, and which one is better than the other. So let me get through the rest of these 5 things that we're going to talk about, and then we can kind of answer that question and come back to you, Pruki. So make sure that I answer you at the end. Okay, so employability. So this is really one of the biggest things that an MBA program wants to know is, are you the right fit for us? Because can we get you a job post-grad? So they're going to be looking at your career goals, short-term and long-term. They want to see kind of what your vision is, and does it make sense with your past experience? Do they see people that typically recruit at their school hiring you? So previous experience is important for a couple of things. They want to look at the responsibilities that you've had and what you've accomplished, but sometimes the previous company also carries clout. So when we talk about, I've had a lot of clients that work for like Deloitte or EY, and when a company is, so when a recruiter is looking at a resume and they see a company like that, they automatically know what that candidate has been exposed to as far as an employee at one of those firms. So if there's anything they can naturally assume about you from your employer, as far as like knowledge of business and exposure to different parts of the process and different divisions, then awesome. That's something that is great for them, because in their mind, they automatically know that, hey, he or she has been through this amount of training, and we don't have to worry about the basics. And then they want to talk about the match with the school's employment report. So number one thing that I think anybody should do when they're looking at MBA programs is look at the employment report. So if you just go into the search bar, type in the school's name and say, like Johnson MBA employment report, pull that up, look at the document, and that's going to tell you so much about the school and the MBA program. They're going to tell you who the typical recruiters are, what positions they typically go into, and then the salaries. And so it's going to give you a strong picture of, is this a great place for me to apply to get a job in XYZ? And then maybe let's say, like, I know that I want to move into tech, but I'm not exactly sure what role I want. So sometimes they'll break down the different roles that people have had based on the different divisions that they're in. So I would definitely make sure that you look at that employment report. It's going to give you a lot of information for what you need to kind of understand about the school. Then after that, they're also going to be looking at, are you a good match for them? Is this school going to get you to that next spot? So Tepper, Cornell, NYU, Columbia, they're well known for product, right? I might think you could also throw Kellogg in there, and really any top 10 school. But in the end, like, these are the best ones that you'll see for moving into product. And so when you go over to a school that's maybe more known, like Yale is well known for more of like the social and government side of things, and you say that I want to be a product manager for a tech company, it might not make sense for them because they are not, that's not the typical recruiter for that program. Or if you say you want to go into HR, that's a little bit too broad for them to be able to say like, oh, we have people exactly recruiting for that role. And so, it makes things a little bit of a mismatch for them. Let's see if there's any questions before I move to the next. Nope. Okay. So then the next thing, again, that kind of like flows into this is school fit. And so, one of employability is going to be really important for them because they're all graded on that. That's part of rankings, right? So it's important to make sure that, hey, we're the right school for you because we're going to help you get the right job. Then they want to make sure that you're a personality fit. So every school has its own personality. Highly encourage you to not only attend an admissions webinar so that you get to know the admissions team, but I also encourage you to have either conversations with students or engage in the webinars that are led by students. You'll get to know them really well. Sometimes they'll have a diversity weekend or a women's weekend or maybe any kind of weekend or any specific event. Sometimes they'll have like a tech focused webinar or an employment webinar, like about finance, whatever it might be. You'll want to make sure that you attend those events so that you get to know the school really well. Then I'd also look at the clubs and activities and see where they stand as far as your like making sure that the clubs are a good fit for you, as well as the coursework, right? Like, so you want to look at the academics and what they're teaching so that you know that they are going to be a good fit for your career outcomes, your personal growth, and then that personal side as far as like, do they have the clubs and activities so that I can match on the social side of things? And then beyond that, there's always going to be the brand, right? Like you want to make sure that the brand fits not only for you, but like, let's say, like I have a lot of candidates, ARINGO, we help a lot of candidates from India. And so they'll say like, I want to get my MBA, stay in the US for, 5 to 7 years. Then I plan to come back to India afterwards. And so if you're looking to return to your home country or potentially move abroad after, a couple of years of work experience, you want to make sure that that brand carries. So yes, obviously, M7 will typically carry anywhere, but then, like Carnegie Mellon and Tepper have a strong carryback for India. Cornell would have a strong carryback outside of the M7 because it's Ivy. So, thinking about those types of things in the brand and make sure it's a good fit for you. Okay, so that was really the top 5 things that I think that an MBA program is going to really be looking at throughout the entire application. Before we get into how to show them, does anybody have any questions about these, 5 things? All right, so moving on. So we'll talk about how you're going to showcase these 5 things. And so one of them is going to be obviously by your score and being able to show them, what you've accomplished there. And if you're not able to do extremely well in GMAT, GRE, or executive assessment, then we want to talk about the skills that you can bring to the table as far as your academic readiness, your analytical skills, and we can talk about different ways. So one of them might be your One of them might be like taking MBA math, or even like the GMAT organization has a couple of assessments that you can take, or classes you can take as well. Then when we get to your resume, they want to be able to see words that show what you've accomplished. So anything that helps with the leadership, the teamwork, the cultural experience, you want to use those words in your resume. When we get to the essays, they want to be able to hear about your experience in your own words, and they want to hear what you have to say. They don't want you to just tell them what you think they want to say. A lot of the times when we work with candidates, it takes about 3 to 5 revisions of their essays to get to a really strong application or essay, because at the very beginning you're saying a lot, and then you're using a lot of jargon, and then you're using a lot of like very top level different phrases that really don't tell them enough or give them substance. So through those revisions, you're going to get to a really refined application that's going to be able to give them your account of what happened, be able to share and flex any sort of exciting experiences you've had. And then they'll also be able to learn about what you've accomplished. They'll be able to see how they are a good fit for you through those essays by sharing your by sharing what you've accomplished in the essays. So I know that we technically only have about 5 minutes. I'm going to say 5 minutes, but it really is 1 minute. But I know that we're kind of nearing the end of our time together. But if you want to hang on and stay with me on this webinar, we'll go through answer a lot more questions from the audience. But if you do have to leave, please know that we're here to help you as ARINGO, and you're always welcome to join us for a free consultation, whether that's joining on the website or the link that's posted at the top of the chat from GMAT Club during this process. All right, so sorry, I forgot to include these. So the recommendation letters are also a really important part of the application, but actually don't have as much weight. I would say that these are a bit of a litmus test, right? Like, is what he or she projecting in their application true? What kind of leadership and readiness do you have for an MBA program? Is your employer in line? Do they know about your goals for your career? And is this a good fit for you? Especially if you plan to potentially return to the same company, this is a great spot for them to tell you, because when we go back to that employability part of things that an admissions committee is looking for, if you're talking about returning to the same company, you mitigate their risk. Right? So if you're returning to the same company, they don't have to worry about employment stats if you are going to find employment within the next 3 months because you found it on day 1 of the MBA program. And then, so that's really helpful. And if they can mention it in there, that's amazing. Or even if they mention that you're welcome to return, and we'd be happy for him or her to return to the company post MBA, and what kind of role they would be looking for. And then there's also these fun little short answer questions that get thrown in throughout your resume or throughout the application. Don't like skip over them and think like, oh, I'll just put a phrase here, da, 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 da. Like, they're actually looking at those. So make sure you're putting a well thought sentence or two into those short answer questions so that they can get to know more about you, and they have this overall impression of well put together and ready. All right. So, yeah. So now we're going to open up to questions, and I'm going to go back to Putri and your question about the difference between round 1, round 2, round 3, and rolling admissions. So MBA admissions teams will put these rounds together. First round technically has the most seats available and mathematically gives you the most opportunity for admission, right? Round 2, technically there's going to be seats taken from round 1. So mathematically there's less, but they also are going to hold seats per round. And I believe even like GMAT Club will have some sort of breakdown of like how many people or how many people they've typically admitted per round. So there's a lot of research on that. So it's easy to kind of Google and find out like how many people are admitted per round. But where it really counts is like, so let's say that you are a person that they need that would kind of have a risky person or a risky profile. So maybe you have less years of work experience. You're an entrepreneur, or you come from an overrepresented population in the applicant pool. And so those candidates typically have a little bit of a better chance in round one because the committee has a chance to offset anything that they admit in round one with round two and round three. So when we look at your GMAT and GRE score, that's also another thing that they can look at. So, okay, well, in round one, we can take some chances and accept somebody that's maybe like a 690 versus a 730, because in round two, we can accept somebody with a 750 or a 770, and that'll balance out the average GMAT score. So that's where you'll see some of those exchanges come in. Now, I'll say, is that like a guaranteed thing? No, because everybody else is using that strategy too. So, is round one better than round two? It's so hard to say. But I would say submit the application when you're ready and you have the best application possible. So don't push yourself to submit for round one if your employer is going to have to rush through the letter of recommendation, or you really feel like you need to take the GMAT or GRE one more time. The other thing that I would say is that some schools do have a couple of different special rounds. So some of them was called either early action or early decision. And so with those, you're essentially saying, hey, you're my number one choice. If I was admitted to this program, I would drop my application for any other school and submit my $6,000 deposit or more and be ready to attend the program next fall. So with those schools, if they are on your top of your list and you would be happy, then do it. Like absolutely apply during early decision if it works out with your timeline. If not, it's not detrimental. You can still apply in round one and round two and show the school that they're your number one choice, even if you didn't apply during early action. Everything's extremely competitive these days as far as applications go. So submitting an application by a deadline can play into it, but really it's more about the quality of the application versus the timeline that you're submitting in. If you're an international student, for the most part, most schools are going to want your application in by round two in January. Some schools that's round three, depending on if they have early decision or some other fun caveats. But for the most part, most international students need to apply by January. There are some schools that will still accept international students, but for the most part, they've already admitted the people from international cohorts because schools start processing visas for students in February. So they're going to start having you do all the paperwork February, March, April. They're trying to get all that paperwork done. So if you're going through an admissions round in March, you might not get your paperwork until May. So you want to make sure that everything is in line for them as well as you, right? Like you don't want to have to rush around doing these visa interviews, and some people have to go to different countries. It can be really complicated. And so highly advise round one or two. If you have questions about round three or four or applying after January, I'm happy to kind of do those one-off conversations. You can always email me and we can chat about it. I hope that answers your question about rounds. Our Pete, so this webinar is actually going to live on GMAT Club's YouTube channel. So whatever you missed, you can always watch again later or on ARINGO's YouTube channel as well. So next is, what should I emphasize in essays to make my essay unique and outstanding? Please share to us some of the important tips other than the previous things you mentioned. So when we go into essays, by far the most important part is one, having something that's personalized to you and not talking about what you think the school wants to know. Sometimes with our candidates, there's a thread that they can carry throughout their education, their first, second job, and or volunteer experiences. And so, like for me, during college, I always enjoyed working or being part of teams where we were helping people and giving advice for future students or current students, freshmen, that type of thing. And so I really found my calling of helping others through those experiences in college. Then I had some time working in sales, and I really enjoyed the part of helping people solve a problem with one of our solutions. And so really being able to fit that to them. Then when I moved into admissions, it was, being able to help people get to that next step in their career by making sure our MBA program was the best match. So, I can carry this thread throughout my entire career of I really like to help people. And this is how I've been able to do it. And this is how I've done it professionally. This is how I've done it personally. And depending on what the question might be, you want to be able to express that and share that and tie it into the specific part of the either the academics, the career side, or the social side, right? So I really like to help other people. So I look forward to joining. At Duke, they do a Durham Day. And so they go out into the community and they work on projects for the community specifically. Some schools have live action learning labs where in the classroom, you're solving a problem that the city has. Like, so I used to work for WP Carey, and that was one of their projects was that you would work with a city entity to try to solve a problem with your business mindset, and you'd be partnered with people from the city or the community, as well as people from other program disciplines, and you'd work on solving the problem. And you'd be working and collaborating across different personalities and different perspectives to solve the problem. And so, if there's a way that you could say, like, this is something that really speaks to me, and you can share that with the committee through, like, this really is something that is an experience that I'm looking for to help me move into that next space. Awesome. Definitely talk about it, and draw that parallel for them so that they can see it in your application. And they're like, man, they really are a great fit for us. And they know our program. They've done their research. They've talked to other students. They, know what our curriculum is. And so you don't want to say generically that I look forward to the marketing courses at Darden. You want to say, I'm looking forward to this user experience class that is focused on X, Y, and Z. Whatever it might be, you want to really hone in on that. And whatever is unique about you, right? Like, so anything in your profile that you feel like other candidates are not going to have, you want to really leverage that and show how it matches that school. So the answer to the brief, interesting fact about you can be related to one of my hobbies, or should it be something more work related? So if it's something interesting about you, I would say it should be a head turner. Like, I don't know if that's the right word to say or phrase, but I would say that, what's an interesting fact about you could be that I've traveled across 6 different countries or states or whatever it might be. I've traveled across 3 different countries and worked in or, tried coffee from 3 different organic farms or something like that. I don't know what it is, right? But it can be something that's interesting about you that also kind of enhances your profile. So if you haven't told them about your global exposure, share it in that interesting fact. Every part of your application should be sharing something new about you. We shouldn't be repetitive unless it's, you can talk about like that you have worked across. Like if it's generic somewhere, you can be more specific in another part. But the same story shouldn't be told, or it shouldn't be the same bullet point that's on your resume. You want to tell them something different in each part of your application. So it can be personal, professional, or aspirational. Okay, so let's see. Should we push ourselves to apply to M7 schools, even if we don't stand a chance as a mature student? Okay, KP, I love you. I love that you are really interested in it. And I think that, one way to, I think go for it, right? Like if you really want to apply to M7, you don't want to kick yourself later on and say, I really should have tried. Go ahead and do it. Select, I wouldn't apply to all 7, right? I would select the 3 or maybe 4 that really stand out to you and say, these are the schools that really call to me. They have the right fit and I fit them, and apply to those schools and pour your heart into it. I would make sure that one of those schools is Stanford, because they allow you to apply both to the MSX program and the full-time program at the same time. So you can kind of get a double whammy out of, or not, whammy sounds negative. You can do 2 things at one time with that application. So I'd put that in there. Yes. So Putri, yes. So cover letter and essay. Whew, man. So MIT, the cover letter that they're looking for, I have an MIT alum who is a fantastic top-rated consultant for us. His name is Shriram. Amazing. But he kind of has like his own format that he loves to use. And so his formula is kind of like the first part is about you, second part's professional, and the third part is about MIT. So, bringing it into digestible parts for the committee. Each one of those paragraphs in your cover letter need to address something different, but it really is similar to a business cover letter, like applying to a job is how are you answering the call of MIT and what they're looking for in a candidate? And you need to blend that all together in your cover letter. And I'm not saying to use the, in HR, they have like the ATS tracking, like where they're looking for those keywords that you have to match. It's not the same thing there, but you need to match the personality of the school and infuse, that entrepreneurship, that ingenuity, innovation, and talk about how MIT is really the right place for you by sharing more about who you are, what you want to do, and then how MIT answers that. So that's kind of the combination. Again, one-on-one, we can really dive into that. All right, so there aren't any other questions that I don't think I've answered, but if you feel like you haven't gotten an answer to a question, please submit it. If you asked it before and I got skipped over, sorry, but please, yes, ask it now. So again, while we're waiting for any additional questions before we close the session, my email is on here. I'm happy to do profile evaluations. I really like to do them offline because I have a lot of questions. And then again, there is that link to our to schedule a meeting with me post this session. I'm excited to meet with anybody who's interested in talking about MBA applications, B school, anything like that. I'm here to kind of answer those questions, especially if they come up later on. Be like, oh man, I should have asked this in that webinar with Jen. I'm here to help you with that. All right, so I'm going to have another drink of my I think you made a great comment about feeling inferior. I think the MBA admissions process is daunting in so many ways. One is it's a lot of work. And like I said in the very beginning, it's not something that you can just decide to do overnight because there's so much involved. But it really does test your wherewithal as far as like getting through those exams. The GMAT is brutal. Good thing you have a community here at GMAT Club to really help you get through that and help answer your questions and practice all kinds of really fun things. like GMAT Ninja and all his fun videos. I love Charles. So, obviously it's a lot. But then when we start moving into the personal side of deciding on a school and feeling like, am I a good fit for them? Are they going to choose me? Why me out of all these other people? And I think that that's what they're looking for. Somebody who can move beyond that, right? Because you have to have some confidence in yourself to say, I can accomplish this. I've done great things in the past, whether that's academically, professionally, both, culturally, socially, volunteer wise, or even hobbies, right? Like, so I've had some really cool people that have like been the national champions for badminton and cricket and really cool things, right? So it doesn't have to be 100% volunteer community service, because people are always worried about that. It doesn't exactly have to be that. It's community involvement and teamwork that they're looking for. But anyways, so look at what you've already accomplished thus far, right? Like, you've done a lot. You've been able to move this far. And if we're starting to think about an MBA, it really means that you want to go further and that this MBA is going to help you get to the next level. So take that confidence in thinking like, I need an MBA, take that with you and be able to reflect on that. If you need a cheerleader, I'm here to help you. I feel like that's like most of my job most of the time is kind of helping people get through this process, because it feels so personal. So, take these different experiences that you have, figure out a way to share them with the committees and the way that it makes you unique or different, and think about those qualities and how they've added to the professional side or personal side for you and what they've helped your organizations accomplish, and see how that fits into the picture of being in the classroom and contributing something unique and being able to eventually move on to an employer and contribute something unique and help move things along. And then maybe eventually start your own venture and be able to help move things along, whether that's a social goal or professional goal. You have a lot to contribute, and it's really daunting, but I think you can do it. And it just takes some some nerves to get through it all, but you can definitely apply and don't feel inferior. I had one of my candidates, they went to the Duke Fuqua Women in Leadership or Women's Leadership Weekend this past weekend, and she said it was super inspiring and she felt recharged and energized for the process. And so if you're applying for fall 23, I know that's a little bit late to join those, but if you're looking at fall 24, you can obviously look out for those specific weekends and events. You can also join what's called Forte as a female, and that's a great organization that helps with women in business. They do a lot of information sessions to help you with learning how to flex your skills and bring those assets to the table when we talk about your resume and your application as well. And in the workforce, for the most part, that's our big focus, is women in the workforce. But use those different experiences to help re-energize yourself. So sorry. Okay, so KP, you have a scheduled a one-on-one with me tomorrow, or you want to tomorrow. So email me. Let's see if we can work out some times within the schedule. And then if not, Monday. And then any chance that we can waive the GMAT, because I have a science background, but maybe submitting the score is way better, right? So, okay. So right now, there's very few MBA programs in the top 10 that are waiving the GMAT. There are a few. We have a full list on our website that I can send you, as well as far as like schools waiving GMAT for fall 23. So, it really depends on what you're looking for as far as school ranking. To decide on if you want to apply for a school with a GMAT waiver. The score does give them something. So even if it's not within range, honestly, let's just have a personal conversation. Send me an email and let's talk about your profile and see if you should submit your GMAT score or look for those waivers. Is it okay that I put experience even if it's only a summer volunteering experience? Yes. So you absolutely can include whatever experience it is. So include it on your preliminary resume, right? So the first resume that you create for your MBA programs, it should be long, right? Like you want to get everything that you can on there. And then you'll start whittling it down so that you're making sure you're showing different parts of who you are and then things that are relevant. So if you feel like you don't have volunteer experience to share, or if so I'm not exactly sure what this summer means. So if it was like that you literally were working at a camp the entire summer, then maybe that's definitely worth sharing, right? Especially if it has some sort of trickle down effect into your career or aspirational goals. If it doesn't, then maybe the summer doesn't really matter. Something that's interesting about most US and European schools is they're not looking for certificates or any sort of certification of your volunteer time. So if you don't know exact dates, those types of things are, you have accomplishments, but you can't get some sort of paperwork to show it. The schools don't really care about that. Now, Indian schools, I think they do. But most of the time, they're not looking for some sort of certificate or anything. They just want to know what you've done and what you've accomplished and what kind of impact you made. They don't need a certificate or any certification. So, do you have to put a timeline on there? Can you include it in a hobby or interest or, in a part in a line? That might be a possibility. Okay. So any other questions that you guys have? We're way over time. I really enjoyed our time together. Please, 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 if you have questions or if you're watching this later on YouTube and you see this and you're like, oh man, I need to ask some questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them. My email address is there. And again, in the chat box, there is at the very top a link for GMAT Club members to submit or to schedule a calendar time on my calendar directly, so you don't have to go through all that fun stuff of when are you available, and then we'll meet soon. So if you have any questions, I'll speak to you soon. Beyond that, thank you so much for all your time today. If you have any questions, I'm here to help. Thanks.